Hey, how you doing? So this is Neil from perfectsunled.com. Links are in the description of this video. Check them out. In this video, we're going to learn how to grow hydroponically, but with living cocoa. This is naturally grown food, naturally grown whatever you're going to grow with it. You can use this for growing indoor food, outdoor food, and also I'll talk about the benefits of growing marijuana this way versus the other way, or synthetically. I'm also going to talk about the difference between a living medium, which is why this is going to be a naturally grown food, naturally grown marijuana, versus synthetic or even organic dead medium. We're going to describe those differences really fast, and then we're going to go into actually the stuff you're going to need, and then we're going to go through step by step how to mix up the nutrients. And in the future, I might also make a video how to make boogie brew bricks, or boogie brew, sorry. Yeah, so I don't have a video for that yet. She was going to do it, just haven't done it yet, but I want to record that as well. So yeah, stay tuned for that. If I get enough people saying, yeah, please, I want that, please leave it in the comments that you want how to make boogie brew. I'm still going to describe the process in this video, but that will be like a step by step. I don't know if that makes a difference. I think it's just as easy to follow either way. All right, so let's get down first to the difference between synthetic and organic. So a synthetic means that you're using a synthetic nutrient. Synthetic nutrients are typically broken down nutrients so that they're readily available to the plant. A good analogy would be a human being. When a human eats his food, that's the natural way. The body has to digest all the food and give you all the nutrients you need to where it needs to go. That is the healthier way of eating. This is shown to be true. People in comas aren't nearly as healthy because they can't eat food naturally. They have to be fed intravenously. This would be like synthetic nutrients. So the analogy would be the natural, and I'm talking about three different ways of growing: living or natural, organic, synthetic. So the living or natural, again, is like eating the food. Synthetic nutrients would be like feeding synthetic, it's still real. It's just the nutrients are gotten from different ways. They're not necessarily gotten from food. They can be gotten from anything. Nitrogen, just it doesn't matter where it comes from, chemically or whatever, it's still nitrogen, and that's pumped into your veins, right? And that gives you all the nutrients you need. And then organic would be that it's not alive. You're getting your nutrients technically from living tissues and living organisms, but you break it down through enzymes and stuff to make it available to the plant. So this would be like a certain type of IV that is, or maybe it's a mixture. It's like putting a tube down the throat, feeding you some natural nutrients and also feeding you through the veins. I don't know. I guess that's a good analogy. All right, so how does this work practically with the plant? So synthetic nutrients like cycloflower nutrient that I use, I love it a lot. I recommend if you're going to use cycloflower nutrients for your food, if you decide you want to grow hydroponically with your food, to add things like rock dust into your cocoa. Use C90 as well every now and again. Mix that into your nutrients, into the water. C90 is really inexpensive. It's a type of sea salt that has a bunch of trace minerals in it. You can also use liquid seaweed too. Just feed every couple of days with a little bit of liquid seaweed on top of what you're normally feeding it. If you're feeding like 3 times a day by hand, make one of them be liquid seaweed. If you're feeding like I do, drip system, then you can just feed some liquid seaweed by hand every day. But I recommend just adding a little bit of sea salt into your nutrient because it has like 90 trace minerals in there and all kinds of micronutrients. It's just really good stuff. So don't use much of it. It is salt. So you only want to use like a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon per gallon. I would only use like maybe 2 teaspoons for 5 gallons, something like that. You don't need that much of it, but it really will add all that nutrients into your food. Okay, so the synthetic nutrient is already broken down into very small. So a good analogy would be this. Imagine a really good, well, first let's go synthetic organic. Organic is going to be very big, right? They're going to be like naturally organic, like worm castings, very big, like a marble. And a straw has a hard time sucking up a marble. In fact, you can't actually suck a marble up through a straw. But imagine that straw were made out of a very thin latex, like a condom material. Then practically, if you had enough pressure, you could suck a marble up into it because it's going to stretch, kind of like a snake eating a rabbit. The snake's body bulges and as it goes down. So you have this big bulge in your straw going up. So it sucks up the marble, but it does it very slowly. The synthetic nutrient would be like a bunch of BBs, and it just sucks up really easily. Now, there's different qualities of synthetic nutrients. Something like cycloflower is like BB sized. And this again is just an analogy, but it's a good analogy. So it sucks up the BBs very easily because this means that it's chelated. It's mostly amino acids. So it's already broken down into a very small thing that it needs. So for example, if you eat meat, you're getting whole protein molecules. Your body has to break those protein molecules down into amino acids that your body can then use and distribute throughout your bloodstream. If you eat plant-based protein, most of those proteins are already broken down. You're actually eating the amino acids that are contained in the protein. So there's two different ways you can get your protein. Through all the amino acids, like hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are full protein, meaning they have all the amino acids that's in a full protein. And you can eat that with like corn chips and you get all the amino acids that you need. There's other ways to do it too. But your body works less hard because it doesn't have to break it down. Whereas if you eat meat, it takes longer to break down and get all the amino acids you need. So the nitrogen is already broken down into its smaller components in something like cycloflower. So the plant has a much easier time eating it. Whereas a cheaper synthetic nutrient, the molecules are bigger, and therefore the plant has a harder time uptaking everything. And so that would be like, let's say they're they're like twice as big as a BB. That would be like a cheaper nutrient. It's still going to work, but it's not going to work as efficiently. It's also going to clog your lines and stuff a lot faster. You're going to get salt buildup easier and quicker everywhere in your lines and your medium and so forth. Cycloflower nutrients, you don't have that problem. Okay, now organic nutrients, again, is like marbles. True organic nutrients is like big fat marbles, so it has a hard time sucking that up. And so if you took two plants, they're both cocoa, non-alive cocoa. You fed one an organic nutrient, the other one synthetic nutrient. The synthetic nutrient is going to do way better because the organic nutrient is just organic nutrient. You're still feeding it intravenously, right? There's no living action happening, so there's nothing breaking down. It's just you're just feeding it nutrients. So the only difference is you're feeding it nutrient from an organic base versus a synthetic base. It doesn't really help much. And what is living growing? That's naturally growing or naturally growing. That's what we're going to get into now. So with the organic nutrient, it's going to have a hard time uptaking. Now you can buy organic nutrients that have been broken down by enzymes. The thing is, it's really hard to find an organic nutrient that has high numbers. So you're using a lot more of it, and the plant doesn't take it up as easily because it's still much bigger. It's like 4 BBs big, so it's big enough for the straw to uptake, but it still uptakes it slower than it does a synthetic nutrient. And so it's a losing battle there. You're not really giving your plants any benefit whatsoever by doing that. Just use synthetic nutrients. If you're using a dead medium, just use synthetic nutrients. Again, you can add things like C90 and azomite, rock dust, basically into your medium and the rock dust goes into the cocoa. The C90 goes into your nutrient. And it dissolves and you feed it that way. That's going to give your food and your plants all the nutrients you need. Now, if you're just doing marijuana, you don't need all that nutrients in there, right? But if you want all those extra nutrients, then especially the trace minerals in your food, then you want to add that in there if you're growing food with it. Anyway, so living growing is where the soil is alive. So the soil outdoors is alive unless it's been killed by synthetic nutrients. And this is why I never grow with synthetic nutrients outdoors, because I know all that it seeps into my soil. I want to keep the earth alive because living soil is absolutely awesome. So the soil outdoors is fully alive. It has mycorrhizae in it. It has beneficial bacteria in there. And these have a synthetic relationship with the roots. They attach to the roots. They talk to the roots. They allow plants from far distances to talk to each other to know if a pest is attacking one, then all the other ones respond. It does all kinds of cool stuff. Look up like a documentary on mycorrhizae. And mycorrhizae is the foundation of mushrooms, by the way. It's the living network under the earth that grows into mushrooms. And the kind of mycorrhizae that we use for growing are the kind that don't produce mushrooms, but it's the same stuff that is what gives mushrooms their intelligence. When you have this living soil, it breaks down and releases all the nutrients that are naturally trapped in the soil. When things break down, you have worms in the soil. The worms live in the soil and they poop. This is what this is right here. So worm castings means worm shit. That's just a fancy way of saying worm shit. So when you put worm shit into your soil, the plants can't uptake it very easily. There's nutrients locked a bunch of nutrients locked in that worm soil or worm shit, but the plants can't uptake it. So if you have a living medium, then it breaks it down. It breaks down all the nutrients in the worm shit, allowing the plants to absorb it. And this is what happens outdoors, right? This is why you want worms in your earth, because they create all kinds of nutrients for your plants. And then the microorganisms break that nutrient down so the plants can uptake it. Very cool stuff. All right, so and just I don't want to go too long on this, but just know that living soil outdoors has all these microorganisms in it, and that's what breaks down all the nutrients. So the nutrients that are too big for the plant to absorb, it breaks it down into small particles so that it can be absorbed very easily. And that's why you want to grow naturally. So, and the reason why I say that is because you can grow organically. It's technically organic, but it's not alive. It's not living soil. It's dead. No microorganisms in there whatsoever. You're just feeding nutrients that are very hard for your plant to uptake, and they just happen to be from living sources, so that it's organic. What we're going to be growing is naturally. We're going to create a living cocoa, and then we're going to feed that living cocoa. Since it's a hydroponic medium, we're going to feed that living cocoa hydroponically, getting the best of both worlds. With marijuana, what this means is that your buds will smell better, especially after curing. They'll have a stronger smell. This is one thing. This is what I've noticed with living naturally growing marijuana, especially hybrics. And that we're showing you guys how to do it. It's very easy. Basically, the mycorrhizae and the bacteria, especially the mycorrhizae though, feeds off of carbohydrates. The plant feeds it carbohydrates, and then the mycorrhizae feed the plant nutrients, mainly nitrogen. And so that's a symbiotic relationship. If you put a little bit of sugar into your feeding when you feed the plants, it feeds all the microorganisms. So now they have more than enough sugar. They don't have to take it from the plant. So now the plant is creating all this extra sugar, but it's not feeding it to the mycorrhizae, so it's being stored in the plant. So the plant now has extra sugar content. This is really great for if you want your food to taste much sweeter. Sweeter tomatoes, sweeter lettuce, tastes good. It's like, have you ever had like a winter kale or winter lettuce? In the wintertime, the plant produces a lot of extra sugar in order to survive the cold. So what happens is the plant senses that it's getting very cold, and what is harder to freeze, water or sugar water? Sugar water. Sugar water is harder to freeze. It takes a colder temperature to freeze sugar water than it does just water. So when the plant has a high sugar water content, it survives the winter easier because it's harder to freeze. That's why your winter kale and stuff tastes sweeter. If you've ever tried that, yeah. But we can do that, by getting a hybrics method of growing. Right. So that's basically it. So that's your natural thing. So now let's go ahead and get into how do we get our cocoa to be alive? How do we make it natural? Well, we need to first inoculate it with living organisms. So you can use something like Mycobliss. This has 5 different kind of mycorrhizae in it. Some people say mycorrhizae, it's all correct. There's no correct way to pronunciate it. So just so you know, I like saying mycorrhizae. It's the most, if you want to be anal, it's the most correct way. It's based on where the word comes from, the languages and stuff. Anyway, so you could do something like this, but this is only going to give it your mycorrhizae, the fungi, where you still need bacteria. Now you can buy bacteria by itself, or you can get bacteria inside of worm castings. But I recommend to get something like this. This is the granular root zone. I think Down to Earth also makes a non-granular, more of a powdered form. And I recommend the granular only because it's not going to blow everywhere and stuff like that. It just makes it easier to work with. But you can get the non-granular. Also, the granular, gives the plant something to break apart. But either one's fine. Either one works great. And this stuff I'm going to teach how to use it properly. We just transplanted the basil last night into the bigger pot, and we did all this method in order to transplant it. So there's 2 different things you can do to make your cocoa living cocoa. Then we're going to get into how to actually water it and stuff like that, what to water it with, nutrients, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing you need, I would buy, is some of this. I mean, you can add some of this in if you want to. I have this extra stuff, so I might as well use it, so I top dress it sometimes, or I put these 2 together in there just to give it an extra boost, I guess, of mycorrhizae. But this has all kinds of great stuff. It has your mycorrhizae, has different beneficial bacteria, has more than one kind of mycorrhizae, so this is really good stuff. and it's really inexpensive, and it's all organic. It has the OMRI, so it's totally certified organic. All right, so you're gonna need this. Also, I like to add a little worm castings. Now, when you add worm castings, I don't recommend to add it into the cocoa itself, because then you're starting to turn your cocoa into soil. That's really the main difference, right? If you add 1/3 worm castings, half worm castings, half cocoa, you now have a soil. You can't treat that hydroponically anymore. It holds on to too much moisture too fast. If you add like 1/3 cocoa, 1/3 vermiculite, 1/3 worm castings, or 1/3 compost, you now have a soil. So you don't want to add too many worm castings, but I do like to add a little bit to get all the benefits, the other beneficial microorganisms that are in worm castings, and also gives it a little extra nutrient boost that it gives the microorganisms something to eat off of. So I use it just like 1 to 2, like a tablespoon per 5-gallon pot, Anyway, so the first thing you want to do is you want to add root zone to the actual place where you're going to be planting your cocoa. Actually, before we do anything else, one thing you might want to do is this. We can add a little bit of nutrients to the whole entire cocoa if you want. So let me go ahead and show you that. I'll go through all the stuff you're going to do here in a second. So BioLive is something you're going to want. This is also by Down to Earth, OMRI certified. It's a 542 nutrient. This is great for most of the growth. You want to add a little more. There's different ways to get potassium. One of the things you can do is just add lagmanite powder. They also sell lagmanite, the same company. So you can buy the lagmanite as a box just like this, and it'll last you a long time because you're not going to add that much of that in there. But anyway, what I would do is to take, like, if you have, let's say, if you had a 5-gallon bucket, I would put like 2 tablespoons of BioLive and mix it all throughout it. Now that's not how I do it. How I do it is like this. I'm going to show you how I do it. So anyway, this is one of the products you want to get though, BioLive. Great stuff. You can actually grow your entire grow with BioLive just using powders and top dressing with powders. I do this outdoors. It just makes it easier. You can also use like Dr. Earth powder nutrients. They have the green bag, which is all-purpose with the tomatoes on it, I think. They have like a more pink bag, which is called Flower Girl. Their Flower Girl is excellent for your flowering stage. So you can also use Dr. Earth powder. It's really good stuff. I recommend using their powders over their liquid line. The liquid line has changed. It's now made from a bunch of food from stores and stuff, which is good. It's all organic. It's great stuff. And you want to have a living cocoa or even a living cocoa or living soil in order for it to be able to use that nutrient properly. But it's really expensive, so I recommend. There's other things you can use that's just as effective and organic. And I'll be going through that here in this video, showing you how we do it, how we make it. It'll be like a live. She's actually going to show you live how to do that. My wife is. Okay, so for powder nutrients, so you can either use this, which is much cheaper, or you can use Dr. Earth. It's up to you. Both are really great stuff. Let's go back to. Here's my notes. I wasn't even looking at them actually. I'm actually looking at it now. Yeah, I went through the straw thing, absorption. Okay, cool. Yeah, now we're going into what we need. All right, cool. That's all the notes I wrote. I don't need any more. All right, so we got the root zone. So the first thing I like to do is I like to fill my pot up with cocoa. Now I like to add like 30% perlite. I've been trying the big perlite right now, but I think I like the smaller perlite. It's cheaper anyway. So 1/3 perlite, 1/3 cocoa. This works really good for hard pots. If you're in an air pot or a fabric pot, you might want to use just cocoa or only like 10% perlite because it does dry out much faster. It's up to you how you're going to deal with that part of it. If you're on a drip system, it doesn't matter if it dries out fast because you're going to be watering several times a day. It's actually better that way. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get down to what we do. So the first thing I like to do is put my cocoa mix, so either just cocoa and perlite or just cocoa, into my pot. Let's say I'm using a 5-gallon pot or number 3, a 14-liter, whatever. Again, how to tell the difference. If you're buying nursery pots, a number 5 or a so-called 5-gallon is 5 times 0.7, so it's actually 3.5 gallons. And then times that by 4, which is a 14-liter pot. So if we have a 14-liter pot, what I like to do is fill it up to where I have like a couple inches left because I'm going to be transplanting the plant from a smaller, either a 4-inch Rockall cube or something into it, right? So I need to make some space for that. I take that top area, the top 3 inches or so. I take some of that down to earth. What was it called again? I always forget the name of this. BioLive. I always want to call it BioThrive for some reason. All right, so we take BioLive and we mix it into that top 3 inches. I know this would be so much more interesting if I actually was doing this live right now and showing you how to do it. Matter of fact, we could have recorded it last night when we transplanted the basil. I didn't think about that. I do apologize for that. My health is just not very good, and yeah, so I don't really get around much even in the house. I know it sucks. It's just the way it is. Don't ask me what's wrong with me because I'm not going to tell you. Just know that just recording this video right now is a little bit difficult. So if we take the top 3 inches, we mix like a tablespoon of BioThrive into it. That's about all you need. I just use plastic spoons, and I take 2 plastic spoonfuls. That's what I did. I know about what a tablespoon looks like. So 1 tablespoon, that's all you need. Did I say 2 tablespoons? I meant 1 tablespoon or just 2 spoonfuls. Good sized spoonfuls. And just mix it all into that top 3 inches. That's all you want to do. And then just like any other transplant, you want to water it down to get it moist before you add the plant into it. But we're not done yet because there's other stuff we need to add to our living cocoa first. The root zone we're going to actually add last. And the worm castings, we can either add a little bit of worm castings now, or we can top dress it. I like to go ahead and add it now. So all you need is 1 to 2 spoonfuls of worm castings. Again, you can actually mix the worm castings all throughout the cocoa if you want to, but, before you put it in the pot. Or you can just do it like the same way as BioThrive. Mix it into the top 3 to 4 inches. So 2 spoonfuls, mix it all throughout there. Good to go. Or just 1 tablespoon. Let's go ahead, before we get back to the root zone, let's look at other stuff we're going to need. So here's just a big picture of the worm castings. That's the picture we already looked at. Okay, so this is the other stuff we could use. We're not necessarily going to use all of it. Boogie bricks, you don't need this. I got it with a big thing I bought from them. It was because I wanted to get started with it. It's a starter package. It came with all of this stuff. It came with worm castings, boogie bricks. It came with this form of premium worm castings. It came with C90, boogie brew filter, all kinds of great stuff for like $100 and something bucks. And then after that, all you have to do is buy their boogie brew mix from that point onward. You can also make your own teas. It's not that difficult, but their tea is really high quality. Has a lot of good stuff in it. All right, so this is stuff that you definitely want to have C90. If not C90, then you definitely want to have azomite. I recommend using both, but if you need to just use one or the other, I'd probably just use azomite into the cocoa. But this is great to feed into to actually top feed with every now and again. You don't want to use this all that often. You're doing very little of this. And then boogie bricks is basically to feed all that organic stuff in there to make the high bricks. It's mostly molasses. You can just feed with powdered molasses. You can buy that online. You can probably buy it at a nutrient shop or a grow shop. You can also just use sugar. It's not that fancy. So next is, so Boogie Black is not something you need. That's just, again, something that came with my thing. It's actually really good stuff. It's beetle bodies or something, and it's supposed to help against different fungus and like different. It's basically like it helps the soil be strong and alive and helps it fight against pests and stuff like that. It also came with this pure protein. This is dry codfish. It also came with the water-soluble amino acid powder. So this adds the amino acids into your soil. Now this is really good because amino acids do several things. This is also kind of a form of amino acids, but it's more protein. This is more broken down. But what this water-soluble amino acid powder does is it makes it easier for your plant to have a high calcium, or rather to take up calcium into the leaves. And naturally, just having calcium available. So we're going to use CalMag, by the way. That's very important. I'll go to that in the nutrient part. But for the plant to absorb the calcium, obviously the pH has to be right and stuff. But if you add some amino acid in there, it makes it to where the calcium uptake is even higher. This isn't necessary, but you could use this. You're going to have a lot of amino acids just in the nutrients you're going to be using anyways. But this is good stuff. So basically what that will do is it'll allow the plant to have a high calcium. And what that does is things like powdery mildew, they land on the leaf. It makes those the calcium in the plant. It creates, I forget what it's called now, but it creates this outer layer that is very thick, and it's hard for the things like powdery mildew to penetrate into, and they end up dying before they can get down into the water in the leaf, because that's what the powdery mildew gets on the plant, and it grows into the plant in order to take the water out of the plant, out of the leaves. having that thicker barrier of wall that having a high calcium, or once the plant is able to uptake, just feeding a lot of calcium isn't going to do this. The plant has to be able to uptake it. And so when the plant is able to uptake all that calcium, it creates a thick wall barrier. It makes it harder to get things like that. Now you could buy some pure protein if you want to. We already have BioThrive in there, so it's not necessary. But this is basically like a dry fish protein, and you can top dress with like a spoonful of this if you want to just give it an extra boost of protein to get through that. You only add this one time, and this is just to get through that initial veg stage. This is a harder to access protein anyway, so it really has to be broken down, so it's kind of hard to overfeed with it. So just add like a spoonful in there. It just gives a spoonful or two to give it an extra boost, and you can mix that into the top. You don't want to mix too much stuff into this top cocoa, otherwise you're starting to turn it to soil. So I would maybe add this later, like I don't know, halfway through veg you can add some of this if you want to, or you can just add a little bit to the top now, just not much. Just don't mix it in, just kind of have it top dressed. And then Boogie Brew filter right there. So that's the video we're going to be showing you guys. The Boogie Brew filter is important. You want to have some sort of filter that filters out the chlorine in your water. If you don't, and the reason why is because if you let your water sit overnight, the chlorine will evaporate. But there's also another form of chlorine, like chloramine or whatever, that's hard. It doesn't evaporate so easily or quickly, and so the filter will get rid of that. So you want to have a filter that removes that from your water. This is essential to growing organically. Why? Because chlorine and chloramine kills the living organisms that you work so hard to build up. So your cocoa is not going to be a living cocoa if you're feeding it chlorine. So make sure to use a filter on your water. The Boogie filter is a great one. There's other filters too that work. So there's C90, shows you what's in it. And I'm trying to get down. Sorry, it's oh, azomite. Here we go. So azomite is something you want to add to the cocoa as well. I recommend adding this throughout all the cocoa. Just two big spoonfuls or a big tablespoon in there, and just mix that all throughout your pot. If you're making a whole brick of cocoa, like 3 cubic foot or something, or you buy a bag of cocoa that's 2 cubic foot, you really can't use too much of this. So just use like 5 tablespoons for that whole entire brick or the whole entire bag, and just mix it all up really good. Just mix it all into. You can use a whole cup. Just dump a whole cup of azomite in there, and mix it all throughout. You don't want to overuse it because it's expensive. So a cup should be more than enough for 3 cubic feet, and just mix it all throughout. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I like to mix this all throughout it, but you could just mix it into the top 5 inches if you wanted to. But I recommend mixing it all throughout your cocoa. This is really important stuff. You really want this. This helps feed your microorganisms. It also helps feed you. And look at it, just the calcium. It has 1.8% and 5% magnesium. Yeah, so it has a lot of good stuff in it. Even has some sulfur, but it has tons of trace minerals as well, which they don't list in here. Like 90, usually it's about 90 trace minerals. And all that really does help plants in ways that we don't even know yet, but it clearly makes a difference when you grow with it or without it. Definitely don't skip this if you're going to grow food. You want all that good nutrients in your food, and this makes it available. If it's in your soil or in your cocoa, then it's in the plant, if the plant can absorb it. But yeah, just don't skip this. It's really good stuff. Again, it keeps your entire microorganisms alive, the whole living system. So I recommend putting that in there. And then let's see here, what else we got. Oh, Boogie Brew. I'll get into Boogie Brew. I don't know if I'm even going to go through Boogie Brew in this thing because it's not necessary, but it really does help keep the living organisms alive, redoes them. But as long as you're everything right, your living organisms should be awesome and good to go. But you could use Boogie Brew you can also use this as an actual nutrient if you find this is cheaper and you don't mind making teas. You can even use it as a top dressing type thing. But anyway, okay, so that's that. Let's go back to, so after you add the azomite, the BioLive, so you added BioLive, you added azomite, and you added worm castings. That was all really important. You added all that. That's the main things you want to add. The other stuff I mentioned, you could add that too, but those 3 things you definitely want to add. Those 3 things. Here we go. My hand was like off the camera. Definitely use those 3 things. Again, BioLive, azomite, worm castings. The C90 you don't need to add that to the cocoa. That's going to be fed every now and again into your nutrients that you mix up. Okay, let's get back to this picture now. Okay, now what we have to do is add our root zone. You can add both these together if you want, but root zone is all you need. There's no reason to buy this, just buy root zone. So now what I like to do is I like to make a hole where I'm going to be putting my Rockwool cube or whatever you're going to be putting your plant in there. Make a hole for it so you can fit it in there. Take the root zone after you've made your hole. Make sure the cocoa is wet. So water it down with some water to make sure it's all nice and wet. And this will also help all that stuff you just put into there kind of mix up into the cocoa. Use good water. If you don't have a good water filter, then use filtered water. Buy filtered water. Buy RO water or something. But those filters are really inexpensive. They hook up to your hose and they fill up a bucket very fast. They're very high flow, and they get rid of all kinds of stuff. But mainly you want to get rid of that chlorine and chloramine. So get a good filter like that. It just screws onto the end of your hose, and then you turn the hose on and fill up your thing with it. It's really fast. Anyway, so use good water, get it all nice and moist, and then take the root zone and take about 2 or just a spoonful is all you need, a big spoonful. And you can also just use like a teaspoon or whatever, maybe a tablespoon. This stuff's kind of expensive. You don't need a whole lot of it. And just sprinkle the powder all around the little hole you made. And because it's moist, it'll kind of stick to it. You don't need, like I said, a spoonful. Just sprinkle it around good, mainly on the bottom is where we want it. We also kind of want to get it on the sides. And then take your Rockwool cube, whatever it is that you're going to be transplanting, take another spoonful and sprinkle. Let's say this is the cube right here. All the roots are out here. Sprinkle it all over the roots. Just sprinkle the stuff because that's where it needs to grow. It needs to form in the root zone. Sprinkle all over the roots like that, and then put that inside. And then how you normally transplant, cover it back up. Maybe sprinkle a little bit on the top, and then you want to water that in there. So just put a little more water and let it all water in nice and good. Maybe put just a little bit of sugar. I mean like a teaspoon of sugar. Just top dress that right around the stem, and then just water that in there with the root zone. That gives it a little bit of boost. It gives your microorganisms something to eat off of. You can if you do have it, you can use the boogie bricks and feed them a little bit of that. If you have powdered molasses, or if you have regular molasses, you can just feed a little bit of that. And yeah, so that's that. The next thing you want to do is I like to add I like to top dress my worm castings personally. I don't like to mix it into there. So if you want to do the way I do it, then just take two spoonfuls of worm castings, sprinkle that all around the top surface of the plant now, of the pot, and you want to do all this before you water everything. So there's no reason to water this in yet. Let's add everything else first. So let's add 2 spoonfuls of worm castings to the top, and then a little bit of sugar or the boogie bricks or molasses, whatever. If you have liquid molasses, you can just add that to your water and then water it on top. And that's it. Now, before you water, also make sure you pH your water to like 6.0 or 5.8. And then also make sure that you can pH it to 6.2 even. Hold on. All right, so that's everything you need in order to make your soil alive. In this case, your cocoa alive. That's how you make living cocoa. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to add too much stuff to it, because when you add too much stuff to it, it will get rid of its hydroponic properties, which is that it holds a high amount of oxygen when it's moist. Now you want to keep cocoa moist, so even with this method, we're still doing hydroponic methods. So everything else applies the same as how I teach to grow with cocoa, and that is that all that we just did, that's a one-time application. You don't have to do that anymore. C90 mineral, this is optional to feed with, like maybe once a week. A teaspoon per like 5 gallons of water really is all you need. It goes a long way. And maybe every 2 weeks even. The boogie bricks is not something you need. The worm casting is not something you need either. Well, you need this is the higher quality worm casting. And the worm casting is also optional. You don't have to use the worm casting. It's not necessary to make a living cocoa. The things that are absolutely necessary to make living cocoa is the azomite and the root zone. You absolutely need those things in your cocoa. It's not optional. And then BioLive, you need that in there. Or if you don't want to use BioLive, you can use like Dr. Earth, powder nutrient. The reason why I recommend BioLive is it has a bunch of extra organisms inside of it, and so it's already inoculated with all that good stuff. And this is just going to ensure that everything's there and goes good. And then you need to top dress, with some type of carbohydrate. So either just regular brown sugar, regular white sugar, organic sugar. You can use the boogie bricks, you can use molasses, you can use powdered molasses, or all kinds of different stuff you can use. And you just want to add a little bit of that. And you only want to feed that like once a week. You don't need a lot of that. Once a week, maybe even every 2 weeks. And you just need a very little bit. So if you're using something like boogie bricks or using a powdered molasses, a teaspoon. Just top dress a teaspoon on there once a week. That's all it needs. And then water, right before you water, just put a teaspoon on there, or mix it into your solution. If you're using a big container though, then like a big drum like I use in your drip feeding, don't do that. Just add a little bit of sugar to water. It's like warm water. Mix it up really good, and just top dress with that. Just top feed with that. Only like once a week. They don't need that much sugar. And this will have your plants go into high bricks mode, so you'll get that. You'll get like a lot of extra. With marijuana, this means you'll get a lot of extra trichome production. You can get frost your weed that way, and it also makes the weed sweeter. I think some people think that this helps the flavor. It definitely helps the smell, and some people think it helps the flavor as well when you smoke it. But anyway, with your food, this means your food will taste better and it'll be sweeter, which is always awesome. And then the C90, this is optional, but if you want, at the same time you feed sugar, just feed some C90. Again, 1 teaspoon for like 5 gallons of water. That's really all you need. So just a tiny little bit. If you're only going to be watering once a week and you just want to put it on top of the plant, I would literally just put like a quarter of a teaspoon, maybe, like maybe even less than that, like a little pinch, not like a pinch, but so if you have a quarter teaspoon spoon, fill that up only like maybe halfway, just like the tip of it, or even just the tip of it, like 1/3 of the way, and then dump that into your water when you feed with it. It doesn't need that much of this stuff. It goes a long way. You could actually do a teaspoon, but it's really not necessary. But I would only do like maybe once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. And then everything else is just how you feed every day. And that's what my wife is going to get into now. She's going to show you how she does the nutrients. You'll understand how much you're supposed to use. And there's different kinds of liquid nutrients you can use. You can also just use powdered nutrients. You can also make powdered teas. You can take BioLive and make a tea out of it. You can use Boogie Brew tea, which I think on the long run, the Boogie Brew is going to cost you, it's going to be more costly because you need to use about half a cup of each to make your tea strong enough. To make a 5-gallon batch of nutrients, you use a half a cup of the Boogie Brew comes with 2 bags inside of it. Use a half a cup each bag, put it inside the burlap bag, and then you want to take a good air stone, you bubble that over for like 12 hours or so until you start getting foam on the top, and then you want to water with it right away, and that's your nutrient. You can use that. You can also use BioLive and just put the powder on top dress it like every couple days, or even maybe every week, because you're gonna be watering every day, so it's gonna be pulling it through the soil or through the cocoa. And what I recommend putting like, I don't know, a spoonful or two like every 4 days or every 3 days. If you do that, then just water with your CalMag water. Always make sure to add CalMag in your water. Always be sure to pH your water before you water, because we're not using things like lime and stuff in our living cocoa, so we're controlling the pH ourselves. This is still a hydroponic way of growing, and this is where you're going to get the benefit of organic, but you're also going to get the benefit of hydro, of it growing very fast and very big. You can be watering every single day. You can water on a drip system. If you water on a drip system, I don't recommend using the fish fertilizer. You can still use that. If you're going to be using a liquid fertilizer, I highly recommend to probably hand feed, because you're going to burn through pumps. It's going to make your pumps get really dirty very fast. You're going to be cleaning your pump all the time because it turns to more of a sludge. Also, the organic nutrients doesn't last as long in the open. It can go bad very fast. So unless your plants are going through, you want to make small batches. So don't make a big old drum of it. You would only want to make a small, like half your drum or even a quarter of your drum full. You want to make sure it goes through it in about 3 days. I just don't recommend doing that. So if you want to do drip feed, then use a powder nutrient. So use something like Dot to Earth or the Down to Earth BioLive. And then also for flowering, if you're using powder nutrients, you're gonna have to add some sort of pK booster. If you use BioLive, really all you have to do is add some lagmanite, just a higher amounts of lagmanite in there. So let's just say you're using 2 spoonfuls of BioLive, then you would use like a half a spoonful to a spoonful of lagmanite, something like that. And that would be for your pK boost. And you don't want to do that you want to do that like every other feeding or something. And then I'm trying to think what else you can use powdered wise for the PK booster. Um, Obviously, you can use something like Flower Girl that has kind of a, it's still kind of low in the PK area though. You still want to use like Lagmanite along with it. So yeah, if you're doing the top dressing powder, definitely use like BioLive and Lagmanite. I would always use a little bit of Lagmanite every single time you feed anyways, like maybe a quarter spoonful or something like that. And then for your PK booster, once it starts flowering, you don't want to use like a whole spoonful of that stuff every time you feed, every time you top dress with it. And make sure you're top dressing in a place that the water that's dripping is going to drip onto it and pull it down into the soil. And so make sure to just put it right. But like if you do like I do, it's one tube feeding the cocoa. Just make sure it's right where the water is spraying onto the medium. That way it puts it into the medium. Yeah, so that's that. And then obviously if you're going to be doing like a liquid nutrient, I don't recommend putting liquid nutrient. I recommend doing it by hand. And now she's going to show you how to mix it and how how much it takes to make the proper amount of ppms. Again, if you use a tea, I know the Boogie Brew tea, for 5 gallons of water to get the proper ppms, about 0.7 EC or so, it's half a cup of each. And then boil that, bubble that. You only use like 2 gallons of water to bubble it, and then you add the other 3 gallons, and just keep adding a gallon at a time and check the ppms to get it where you want it, because it's gonna be really strong at first. Each gallon makes it weaker and weaker. Once you get it to about 5 gallons, that should be about 0.7 EC, and so that way you can get the proper EC that you want with the brew. And I recommend not to put that into a system because it dies very quickly. And then let's see here. You can also, if you don't want to feed the powdered nutrient, you don't mind feeding by hand, but for some reason you don't want to use the liquid nutrients I'm going to be talking about, you can take something like BioLive and you can make a tea out of it as well, the same way. Just make sure you have a really good air stone inside of a bucket. You want to bubble it for like a good 12 hours or so. And sometimes it only takes a couple hours. Once it starts having like foam coming out of the bucket, only use like 2 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket of water. That's all it takes to brew. And then just make sure your stone's in there. Make sure you put the nutrients inside of a burlap bag or inside of a pantyhose or something, and then close it up so that it doesn't go all into your water, because you just want the tea, right? So it's just like making a tea. So put it inside of a pantyhose, tighten it with something so that the way it doesn't all come out of it. Put the pantyhose, sink it inside of the water, put the bubble air stone right next to the pantyhose. It'll bubble and it'll turn into nice good tea in about, I don't know, 12 hours or so. So what I do is like make it at night and then go to bed, wake up, and then it's ready to water with. And yeah, so you can use BioLive. And the reason why I use BioLive and not like something else is BioLive has all those living organisms in it. So you're actually activating all that living. You're actually making a living tea, and you can water with that as your nutrient. But yeah, so those are different ways to do it. And here's another way to do it, which is how we do it. You can either use Age Old. There's their fish kelp by Age Old is the brand, and that's a 322, I believe, or something. I can't remember. That one's really good. Also use liquid seaweed. You can use a lot of liquid seaweed, but you want to use at least twice as much liquid seaweed as you do whatever else you're going to be watering with. It's really hard. It just adds a little bit of your, most I think it's potassium it adds, but yeah, you want to add a good amount of that. And then the other thing you can use is liquid seaweed plus Alaska fish. Alaska fish is like a 511. A lot of nitrogen in that stuff, and since you're feeding with it every day, you don't need a whole bunch. You don't need a really super high number. And so you can feed that every day along with the liquid seaweed. And then when you get into flower, you can use Alaska fish along with Alaska bloom. Now, yeah, Alaska, it's their Alaska More bloom. It's a 01010. Now, technically, it's not fully organic. If you're really worried about that, then you can use something else for a PK booster. And it's really hard to actually find a PK booster that is all organic. One way you can do that would be using something like, let's see here, seagull poo. That gives you the high phosphorus. And then using Lagmanite. So seagull poo and Lagmanite together makes a nice PK booster. You can mix those together inside a pantyhose or inside a burlap bag and make a tea out of that, and that would be your PK booster. You can also just top dress with that, and that'd be your PK booster. So those are different ways to get a PK booster if you want all organic. That's how I would do it. A little extra work, but you're not going to be feeding PK booster every day. You're going to do it if you don't know my grow method, either get my grow book or go check out my free grow course. Again, the link's in the description at perfectsunled.com. Click on the free grow course, and that's my book as well. You can also click on click on grow book as well. It's a grow pot cheaper than Amazon. And anyway, so that takes you throughout my whole organic method. And so once you have built your soil up, now everything you do is how I grow in that book. You're just going to be using different nutrients than a synthetic nutrient. But yeah, so let's see here, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I think that's pretty much it. So hopefully I've covered everything you need to know. Again, to make the boogie brew or to make any kind of tea, it's really easy. 5-gallon bucket, pantyhose or a burlap sack, pretty much anything, a t-shirt, like pretty much anything, as long as you can seal it up so it doesn't, the powder doesn't seep out of the bag into your water. And that's not the end of the world if it does. You're hand watering, it's not a big deal. But if you don't want all that particulate floating around, that's how you make sure that doesn't happen. And then you want to put that, sink that into the water, about 2 gallons of water, sink that into the water, get a really good air pump. You need a big air pump. Like the air pump should be like this big, right? It's bigger than your hand. Good size air pump that can easily push out, 4 different tubes. And then you can add one of those manifolds, I think that's what they're called. Has 1 and then it has 4 holes. So 1 hole on one side, 4 holes on the other side. Use 1/4-inch tubing, put it on the pump, put it on the manifold. 4 tubes come off the manifold with four air stones. Make sure to use the high quality air stones you get at like a grow shop. They're the bigger ones like this, not the little fish ones. They're the big round. They're the big like cylinder ones. You don't have to have the long cylinder ones. You can use the short 1-inch ones, but they have to be round. They're like as round as a quarter, a little bit rounder, like a silver dollar. And those are really good. If you want to really, really brew your tea, like do 4 stones in there, a pump that can drive 4 stones. You can also just use 1 stone. That's what we do. It's fine. Just make sure to brew it for like 12 hours. More stones means less brewing time. You want to at least brew it until you start to see foam. So, and it will start to smell really bad if you're using boogie brew. Again, the boogie brew, 1/2 cup of each. That should give you what you want. Because you want to start really concentrated so you can dilute it down. Now, if you don't need to make that much nutrients at once, you want to use less. Use only like a 1/4 cup of each one or something, or a tablespoon of each one, and then brew that inside of a gallon or 2 gallons of water, and then see what the ppms are, what the EC is, and then add water to dilute it. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Now let's go ahead and watch the wife show you how I use the age-old. And this, you'd use the same thing with Alaska fish. I don't know the exact measurements yet, so you have to just kind of figure that out. Add like the same amount that you would add age-old kelp, and just see what the ppms are in a certain amount of water. Once you kind of get the idea of that, then you can kind of work out the math how much you need to add to get the ppms you want. But with age-old kelp and liquid seaweed, she's going to show you how to do that now. Make sure to add the CalMag. Don't forget it. She forgot to add the CalMag at first, and the plant suffered a little bit. The critical haze was suffering. Now it's doing good again because she added that CalMag. Use like 2 to 3 milliliters per gallon. Don't go stingy on CalMag. Now, if you want all organic, they do make an organic CalMag. I think even General Hydroponics makes an organic CalMag. Keep in mind, the organic CalMag does not have a long shelf life. Anything organic does not have a long shelf life. That's one of the benefits of synthetic. It has a forever shelf life, just about forever. Especially if it's powdered form, it'll last forever. Yeah, so if it's organic, just make sure you're going to be using it. So don't overbuy organic. Buy smaller portions until you know how much you need, and then you can buy larger portions if you need it, if you know you're going to use it in a certain time frame. But honestly, organic CalMag is not necessary. I kind of like the fact that it's intravenous. It just goes right to the plant because that's something the plant needs a lot of, and it needs it right away. When you grow with LEDs, right, it needs a lot of it. You're growing hydroponically, it needs a lot of it. I do both LED and hydroponically, so it needs a lot of CalMag. And in fact, I like to use 3 milliliters even with my Cycloflower nutrient, which has a lot of CalMag in it already, that's readily available and easily absorbed. I recommend the Botanicare's CalMag Plus. And so some people are just really anal about everything being organic. If you're that kind of person, get the organic stuff. But honestly, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two. I don't mind. Like, mainly I'm doing organic not to like save the planet, although that's a good thing to do. I obviously care about soil, so I don't harm my soil outdoors. Like I said, outdoors I use all organic, so that no nutrients, seeps into my into my soil. Uh, Actually, you know what? Except for my runoff, though, I do pump out my runoff into my grass. I didn't think about that. So my runoff is going to be slowly killing that soil, but it's only a small portion of it that I feed. So everything around it, all the organics around it, are eating that nutrient and are slowly changing that. So that little patch of grass that is being fed the runoff from my synthetic nutrients is not going to like kill the soil because all the soil around it is alive. I'm not like doing my whole yard or something. There's it's a small little 1 foot by 1 foot by however deep it goes, maybe 2 feet deep, and that's all that gets that synthetic nutrient, and then all the microorganisms around are eating it, so it depletes and it eats it up, and it doesn't kill all the soil. So that's okay, but I'm not going to use synthetic nutrients outside, like to water my plants, because I want to make sure that my soil stays alive and I don't kill the land. And that's the most important thing. So if you're using synthetic nutrients, just don't feed it into your ground outside. It's okay if you use it indoors, and the runoff, if you do use the runoff outdoors, only water one little section with it, or even have like a pot or something outdoors and just feed it that runoff, like a pot of flowers or something, and just feed it the runoff. Just keep in mind the runoff is still kind of strong. So anyway, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get down to how she's going to show you now how to do all that good stuff, how to water it. I hope I didn't miss anything. I don't think I did. I've mentioned a couple things more than once, I think, but it's important to make sure you get everything right. Oh yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about, which was what to add. Just really quickly, I want to go over again. So once you build the soil, you don't have to ever build it again, right? So it's built, it's done. That once you build the cocoa to make it alive, it's now alive. You don't have to worry about that unless you fed something like if you did use chlorine water, it might have killed off a good amount of the living bacteria. So you want to repopulate it again. You can do that very easily by just feeding Boogie Brew. Boogie Brew will add it back. Add a little bit top feed with a little bit of root zone, like a spoonful of root zone right around the stalk. So it's right around the main roots. We want to put it around the whole entire top of the pot, but majority of it should be around near the stalk, and then the rest of it will be spread out throughout the top. And then water that in right away, right afterwards. Give it good watering, so all that gets watered in there right away. When you do feed it root zone, feed it a little bit of sugar as well. So either add a little bit of sugar into your water that you're going to be watering it down in, or top dress it with it. And then you already have azomite in there, so you don't have to re-add that. And yeah, just a little bit of sugar, that should be fine, and that will repopulate if anything did get killed. But if it's been a while, like if it's been growing for a month or something like that, and then you accidentally fed with some chlorine water, like it has regular tap water without being filtered, it should be okay, because they're pretty resilient at that point. They've built up a really good, like a month of this stuff growing, they multiply exponentially. So let's just, like, for example, let's just do this. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. They grow faster and faster and faster, right? So, then all of a sudden 1 million becomes 500 million. 500 million becomes a couple billion. A couple billion becomes several billion. Like, they grow very fast. So a month of this stuff growing, it's populated. Everything is populated. Kind of hard to kill off at that point. It would probably take you watering with chlorine water every single day for like who knows how long to kill them off at that point, but you would be slowly killing them off. But it's not something you have, like, once that system's built, you don't have to keep building. It's already built. It's done. But like I said, the only time you'd want to maybe re-top dress with root zone is if you did water with chlorine water, just to make sure that it repopulates really good. But like I said, depends on how long it's been since they've been growing in there. And then yeah, every now and again, every week or 2 weeks, like I said, the C90, sugar like every week or so. And then if you're doing, the main thing I really want to make sure I covered though was like using powder nutrients. So if you wanted to use a drip system, I just want to go over this one more time. If you want to use a drip system, every 3 to 4 days, top dress with a tablespoon or so of BioLive, and then during the if you want to use powder nutrients, then during the, and all this is by Dr. Earth. You can find all this on Down to, or not Dr. Earth. You can find all this on Down to Earth. So BioLive would be your main nutrient. A little bit of lagmanite, just a little bit here and there, like a quarter of a teaspoon, or just a teaspoon or so. That's all you need. Just a little bit when you do your BioLive. Now, once you get into flour, you don't want to use like let's say if you're using a whole tablespoon of BioLive every 3 to 4 days, then you want to use like a regular spoonful or a teaspoon, or let's see here, let me think about this for a second. If you're using a tablespoon of BioLive, you want to use like, yeah, about a teaspoon of Lagmanite. But for your PK boost, what you want to do like several times, at least 3 times, top dress at least 3 times in the life of the flower plant. One time during the beginning of flower, another time when the flowers start to look like they're clumping together and looking like buds, another time like when you're getting toward like the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then you want to top dress with the BioLive plus seagull poo, which you can buy it down to earth, and Lagmanite. Now, the ratios I would use for this, I would still use the same, the tablespoon of BioLive. I would use a tablespoon of seagull poo, and I would use a half a tablespoon of Lagmanite. So with the seagull poo and Lagmanite, it's basically 1 to 2. I'll show you what those look like actually right now, what the boxes look like on the site. So you want to use 2-to-1 ratio. That is the ratio of 2 for the seagull poo, the ratio of 1 for the Lagmanite. What that means is twice as much seagull poo. So if you're using 1 tablespoon of Lagmanite, you want to use 2 tablespoons of seagull poo. But I recommend for the top dressings for like a normal size smaller pot, it's just going to be like 1 tablespoon of seagull poo and a half tablespoon of Lagmanite. That's for like a 5-gallon, 14-liter pot. You can probably do that all up to like a 10-liter pot. Once you get bigger than 10 liter, you're going to want to probably use like 2 tablespoons instead of just 1. And that includes your bio. Basically, for every 14 liters of medium, use 1 tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon of BioLive, and then 1/4 tablespoon of Lagmanite. That's for throughout veg and stuff. And then when you get into flour, you're going to bump that up a little bit. Actually, I meant a teaspoon. So one tablespoon of BioLive, 1 teaspoon of Lagmanite. That's throughout the veg cycle. And you're going to top dress with that like every 3 to 4 days. If you notice the plant getting too green, back off and do it like every week. If you notice that, and you're still watering every day with CalMag, by the way. So even if you're using powder nutrients, use liquid CalMag. That goes into your water that you're watering with every day. pH it also every day too. So if you're in a drum, make sure to pH it. Everything else I teach you want to follow. So go in there and pH it down to like 5.8 every single day, or to 6.0. You can get a little bit higher with organic, so you can do like 6.0 to 6.2 even. So that's the ratio for throughout the veg cycle, and then you want to adjust a little bit. If it gets too dark green, like I said, back off. Either use less or feed less often. When it starts getting more healthier, bigger, and it can eat more, then go back to what I just said. So you got to kind of adjust a little bit. Use your common sense here. The plant gets super dark green, use less nutrients. If the plant is lighter green, use more nutrients. The CalMag 3 milliliters per gallon, stick to that. And then once you start getting into flower, you want to change your ratio. So now, and this is per every 14 liters. So if your plant is bigger than 14 liters, then you probably want to double the size. Let's say it's 18 liters. It's only 4 liters bigger. It doesn't matter. Still double the amount. So you treat it as if it's, if it's more than 14, it's 2. So now you're doing 2 tablespoons of BioLive and 2 teaspoons of Lagmanite every like 3 to 4 days top dressing. Make sure you're only top dressing. You want to kind of top dress everything, because all of it's going to get wet and go down, but most of it you want it to be right where the drip system is. I recommend, if you're going to be doing this style of powder growing, that you make a drip system that has like four holes of shooting, or even more than that. So one way you can do that is make the drip ring out of the 4-inch quarter hose, put a T end at the end of your connection that's feeding your plant, put a T connection there, have that wrap around making a ring, and then cut 4 sections and put more T connections there. So now you have like 4 holes that are feeding from different areas on the ring. Each of those 4 holes, put a tiny little inch of 1/4-inch tubing, and then another T line. Now you have 8 holes going each way. Hope that makes sense. It's really easy to make, and then have it feed like that. You can also just drill 1/4-inch holes into the tube. That's even easier. So you can actually use the hole punch and just punch 8 holes around it, so it feeds it all. Make sure the holes are facing down, so it just feeds all like that. And that way it's feeding everything at once with the drip ring. So you just add a T. So how I do is I just have one 1/4-inch tubing that just feeds my plant, and that works great. But if you want to, you can, if you're doing powders, add a T connection there, have a tube go around connecting to both sides of connection that goes connected around your plant's stalk, and then just take the hole punch and punch it around and create like 8 holes so it's feeding down. That way it's watering the plant evenly. You can also use a drill and just make the hole about the size of a 1/4 inch, whatever size the hole. Just make sure the drill bit can fit just inside of the T connection, that hole, and just drill 8 of those holes, and they're good to go, or even just 4 holes. Okay, anyway, so ratios. When you get into flower, then for every 14 liters of medium pot size, you want to do still 1 tablespoon of BioLive, but you want to up the lagmanite a little bit now. So the lagmanite, instead of a teaspoon, let's say 2 teaspoons or half a tablespoon, something like that. And then you want a PK boost. I already told you how to PK boost. So the PK boost is the seagull poo and the lagmanite. So what's going to change here is you're still going to add the same amount of BioLive, but now the BioLive is going to be the same, but the seagull poo and the lagmanite is going to be different. So 1 tablespoon per 14 liters, and then 1 or half a tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon seagull poo, half a tablespoon of lagmanite per every 14 liters of pot size. And then you want to just top dress that only 3 times during flower. In the beginning of flower, middle, and toward the end. Okay. Oh, wow, that's a long video. Sorry, guys. There's a lot of information. I know this seems like so complicated, but it's really not. It's really not that complicated. Once you build the soil and make it alive, it's really easy to do. Like, it seems like a lot you have to do, but really all you're doing is what? You're mixing in azomite, azomite. That's it. You can also use a rock dust. You're mixing in rock dust into the cocoa. Super easy. You're done. You put the cocoa in a pot. The top 3 inches, you mix some BioThrive in there. Done. And then you want to make the hole. Put some water so the hole stays. Add some root zone into the hole. Add some root zone onto the roots of your plant. Put it in there. Cover it up. Done. 3 things extra you have to do. Not that big of a deal. And then you want to, top dress with a little bit of sugar, organic sugar or boogie bricks or something, and then top dress with a little bit of worm castings. Water that in. Done. That's the necessary things you have to do. That's it, and you're done. Your soil's now alive. It's going to eat alive, and the only thing extra you're going to do, besides what I just told you how to do with the top dressing or with the liquid nutrients, we're going to learn here in just a second. She's going to show you in just a second here. Then you want to top dress with a little bit of C90 every now and again, every 2 weeks or something. It doesn't need that much of it. 1 teaspoon every 2 weeks. That's all you need to do per 14 liters of medium. And then let's see here, 14 liter pot size. And then you want to top dress like every week with a little bit of sugar, teaspoon of sugar or so. That's it. Oh, another secret. That's what I'm so glad I made this video longer, because I would have forgot to say this. Use Epsom salts. Everywhere you grow, use Epsom salts. I'm telling you, it's just a miracle. It's awesome stuff. When I grew that 3-pound autoflower plant, dry yield, the critical, I used Epsom salts. I forgot to mention this. I used Epsom salts every single time I made nutrients. Epsom salts was part of my regimen. The reason why is because Cogos didn't say it had Epsom salts on it. He claims it did, but I didn't see anywhere. I didn't see magnesium sulfate in there, or if I did, I didn't see much of it. I'm like, that's not a good ratio of magnesium sulfate. So I added Epsom salts about, I think it was a teaspoon for every 5 gallons of water. So whenever I made my drum, I added the Epsom salts in there in order to bring that magnesium sulfate higher. But I've noticed that with all gardening, Epsom salts makes a huge difference. So I like to either put a teaspoon per like 5 gallons of water. You can even do a little bit more. Or I like to top dress all my plants like every week or so with about a teaspoon. But if you just add it to your water, it's fine. So you can even do more than that. Teaspoon for 5 gallons works great. But if you want to use a little bit more, you can. I wouldn't go more than a teaspoon per gallon. That might even be too much, so keep that in mind. That's what I did, about a teaspoon per, and that's what I do now. I don't know how often we're doing it. I don't think we've done it very much this grow. I think she keeps forgetting to use it. But when I'm doing everything, I remember to use it. So I'm trying to remind her to use it. I need to make her a little note thing. And I think I put that in my book. to use Epsom salts because it's really great stuff. But yeah, so do a side-by-side grow one time with it. It really does make a difference. 2 clones or several clones and have half of them get Epsom salts and the other half not get Epsom salts. They have to be clones, otherwise it's kind of hard to do an experiment. But yeah, so there you go. Epsom salts, great stuff. You can top dress it or you can just mix it right into your water when you're watering. And yeah, I think that covers everything now. So we're at like over an hour on this video. But anyway, it covers everything you need to know. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. Maybe I can edit some of it. All right. Now on to the wife. Just in case I don't come back, double piece. Yeah, I wish the search engine made it easier to find down-to-earth nutrients. You can't. Oh, let me see here. Don't think actually it does come up. So if you just type DTE nutrients, you can find it that way. It looks like. Yeah, right here, down-to-earth fertilizer. Cool. You can also type down-to-earth fertilizer, and it'll show up that way, or down-to-earth nutrients, or just DTE nutrients. This will take you to their website. You want to go to their products. And you want to go to, this is blended stuff, so this is where you buy the BioLive. This is where you buy that from. And then they have BioTurf as well, but I don't think this has as much stuff as you want in it. But BioTurf looks like it'd be really good for flowering too, but I'm just looking at other stuff they have here. BioFish might be good for beginning. Actually, BioFish might be better than BioLive as far as for the very beginning, like all throughout veg. Obviously, once you start going to flower, you want to switch to BioLive because you don't want as much nitrogen. Maybe even switch to all-purpose. Actually, this doesn't have the bacteria in it, but at that point, your bacteria is already, everything is built. Your microbiology is fully built. You don't need to keep adding into it, so this should be fine right here. Yeah, 462, I like that. And then acid mix might be good too. Anyway, then we want to add some, let's see here, it's right here. I like how it shows all this right here, so you can just kind of look through everything. Bat guano 931, it's good for nitrogen boost. Blood meal is good for nitrogen boost. Bone meal, so forth. Let's see here. Oh yeah, that's right. Fish bone meal is actually pretty good for a boost too. It adds a little bit of nitrogen to it, but it misses a lot of other stuff you need anyway. We're just going to go for a PK, so there's no actual PK. Lagmanite is one thing you need, and then Seabird. Yeah, you can use rock phosphate. I recommend the Seabird though. So Lagmanite, here's what this looks like. Bam. So you just want to buy a box of this. You don't need a big old bag. This stuff lasts a long time, so just buy a box of this. It's pretty inexpensive. You should be able to find any of this stuff on Amazon. So you can find most of the stuff at your local grow shop too. Just ask them for their down-to-earth products. They should have this. If they don't have it, they can order it. So if you don't like to order on Amazon, you can order it to your local store. You don't want to use too much of this stuff because if you look at the guarantee analysis, it's a lot of sulfur and a lot of magnesium. So it's basically, this is very similar to Epsom salts. A lot of magnesium sulfate in it. But this gives you a really high amount of phosphorus, so because it's soluble potash. So 22%. But along with that, it comes with magnesium and sulfur. So just keep that in mind. That's why I don't want to use a whole bunch of this. I already gave you the ratios to use. All right, next we're going to go to, there we go, this one. So the seabird poo. So guano is just poo. There you go, 011. And this is going to add your, wait, did I say phosphorus before? I think I might have. So this is actually your phosphate. This is your phosphorus that you're adding, right? That's the middle number. Let me go back to that one because I think I might have spoken incorrectly for some reason. Lagmanite. This should be your potassium. Sorry. Yeah, this is your potassium. There we go. Potash, your potassium. Sorry about that. So I think I misspoke there. So that gives you your K. So the last number. There you go. So adding those two and 2 to 1. So you would use, like, let's say you're using 2 tablespoons of the seabird poo, seabird guano, then you'd only use 1 tablespoon of lagmanite to make a PK booster. And you can actually make a you can put this in, you can make a tea out of this. I already told you I made tea. I'm not going to re-explain it again. So you can make a tea out of this and water with that and just check the ppms and keep adding water till you get the ppms you want. And voila, you got a good tea to make your PK booster. That'd actually be if there's a way to make that like water soluble stable, that would be cool. To have a decent shelf life on it, you can sell like a really good PK booster with just these two products, make a really good tea out of them, and then bam, sell that on the market. That's a good idea. A good organic PK booster that's truly all organic. Just those two things mixed together, make good tea out of it, and maybe add some stabilizers so it has a higher shelf life. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, okay, anyway. I think that was everything I wanted to cover now. Double piece. I can't even tell if I'm on the... Where am I at here? There we go. Double piece. Alright, hey, so now we're going to get into where my wife did a recording of the real time. Unfortunately, I was just going to play her doing it all, but she said some things incorrectly. And rather than having incorrect information plus me correcting it, I'll just go through it real fast and show you guys how it's supposed to be correct. So this is the Boogie Blue Plus filter. Again, like I said, you can use any filter that you obviously want to use a fast filter. Now, if you already have like a RO system or something like that, and that's however you feed your water. If you already have filtered water, don't worry about this. But if you don't have filtered water and you're going to do this organic method, you need a filter. It's very important. This is much cheaper than going and buying filtered water. Don't do that. Just hook this up to your hose. Super easy. You can hook this up to your garden hose. You can hook this up to your hose and inside of the laundry room. You know, that little faucet right there. That same hose will hook up to it. So wherever you want to, fill up your water with, that's how you do it. And you can hook this up anywhere you can, or you can have an adapter in the house if you need to. Just get a hose adapter so you can hook this up to it. Anyway, so yeah, it's very simple. They sell different ones. This is the Boogie Blue Plus. I think it lasts longer. I think the regular Boogie Blue filter is like 20 bucks. You can also just look up other brands. Just make sure that it filters out chlorine and chloramine. That's all I want to make sure it filters out. Just make sure that it filters those things out. And pretty much any kind of RV filter should probably filter all that stuff out. And most of those RV filters, I think, hook right up to a hose. So anyway, just look up Boogie Blue Plus, and this is a great one, and it's really affordable. I don't make anything from this, so I'm just telling you what I use, and I like it. So yeah, go ahead and add that to it, and make sure you can see the whole thing. Right, so add that to your hose, and then same way you'd fill up your bucket or whatever you're using, you'd use this to fill it up. Okay, next part is going into the CalMag. So here's CalMag Plus. I don't know if you saw that. There it is. So CalMag Plus. I buy big bottles of it because we go through a lot of CalMag. You want to use 3 milliliters per gallon. Sometimes they say 2 or 3. It really depends, on your water, but just use 3. You can use even 5 milliliters, honestly. I think that's what it recommends on the bottle. I usually do 3 milliliters because you probably have some CalMag in your water. If you're using well water or tap water, even though you're filtering it, it still has CalMag in it, unless you're using an RO filter. If you're doing RO water, I recommend using 3 milliliters for sure. If you know you have a good amount of CalMag in your water, you might try 2 milliliters. I would still do 3 milliliters though. And with CalMag, I might even do 5 milliliters, honestly. For at least 4 milliliters if you're doing RO water. Now this right here is about 3 gallons of water. It might be a little bit over 3 gallons in this 5-gallon bucket. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add 9 to 10 milliliters of CalMag. That's 3 milliliters. So 3 times 3 is 9. It might be, it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you know you have 3 gallons of water, and it's really hard to measure exactly 9 milliliters unless you're using one of those little squirty things that suck it up 5 milliliters at a time. Then just if you're using a little shot glass like we're doing that has the milliliters on it, the 10 is one of the numbers, just do 10. It's not a big deal. 1 extra milliliter, per 3 gallons of water isn't going to hurt anything. And so to show what that looks like, she's going to, there it is. That's the wrong one, so she uses this one. So right there at the 10 milliliter mark. You can also just do it just below it if you want to. Doesn't really matter. A little extra CalMag is great. So bam, fill it up to 10 milliliters, dump it in there, and stir it up. So I'll go ahead and show that. Here we go.
Just switched the little one. A little tired, so I definitely wanted to do this for you guys. Alright, so that's about, you guys can't really see that, but it's literally right underneath 10 milliliters. Pour this in, like so. Rinse my cup. Cap back on, my CalMag. stir the nutrients each time you put something in. Let's get this cow mag out of the way. And now we're going to start
All right,
with...
so that's good. She's learning. She knows that you have to stir it up. So every time you put a nutrient in there, stir it up. This is true for anything you do, especially for synthetic nutrients. Cow mag, stir it up. Put your cycloflower A, stir it up. Cycloflower B, stir it up. Between adding anything, stir it up, including organics. So now we have the fish and seaweed. Now, I really like this stuff. I really like the ratio of it. The negative side about the fish and seaweed by Age Old, that's the name brand, is that it's pretty expensive. I think it's almost $20 for this little bottle. But I think you can buy a gallon of it for cheaper, like the price comes down. So it really depends how much of this stuff you're going to be using. If you're not going to be using a whole bunch of it, then you can get away with using it. I might actually end up using it only because I do like it better than the Alaska fish plus the fish. This is all natural. I know this is all totally natural. This along with the liquid seaweed, you can get a nice ratio, and then only thing you have to do is make a good PK booster, which you can use the Alaskan More Bloom for if you don't mind the fact that their phosphorus isn't totally organic. Which is weird. I don't know why they use phosphoric acid, because they could have just used like rock phosphate or seagull poo. They could have added some seagull poo to it. It already smells bad anyway. Another thing, this stuff doesn't smell nearly as bad. So if you just have a sensitive nose, the Alaska fish smells so bad. It's really bad smelling. Their More Bloom doesn't smell so bad, but their fish is stinky. So if you want something that doesn't smell so bad, and once you water with it, it's not so bad. The smell goes away pretty fast once it's watered and everything. But while you're making it, whoa, it's really, really smelly. And it'll make your grow room smell like fish for a while. And it's like dead, yucky smell. This stuff doesn't smell nearly as bad. It's not as strong. And I really like the numbers. It's a 332. So this has a good amount of your nitrogen, has a good amount of your phosphorus, and even a good amount of your potassium. So this is a good, just rounded nutrient. You can use this throughout the entire grow without using anything else. I recommend using the liquid seaweed as well, though, to get a higher potassium rate. Then for, I'll always recommend a PK boost, but if you absolutely can't do it, then you can just water with more of this for 3 different times during your PK boost, and even more liquid seaweed. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, anyway, this is great stuff. So I highly recommend it if you can afford it. If not, then the Alaska fish, which is a 511, and I would recommend adding a little bit of More Bloom to that. So if you're going to be doing, like, I don't know, let's say Alaska fish, I have no idea I haven't used it yet, so I have no idea how much it takes to get the proper ppms. So you want to do your own test on that. That is, fill up a bucket with like 2 gallons of water, and then add like 10 milliliters and see what that gives you ppm wise, and then write that down. So now or even better yet, just add 1 gallon of water. Exactly. Take a picture of a gallon, put it into the bucket. You have 1 gallon of water in there. Add 10 milliliters of the liquid fish and see what. Test the ppm before you add it, and then test it after you add it, minus the difference. Now you know exactly how much 10 milliliters adds to your water. And then add another 10 milliliters just to make sure it stays pretty much the same. And then test that again. And now you know exactly how much 20 milliliters adds to your water. Write all this down, and then you can just do simple math and figure out how much to add to get the ppms that you need. The ppms are pretty much exactly the same. Actually, that you can use exact same ppms as I use for my cycloflower nutrients that are inside the book, and also inside, actually I think it's only inside the book. I don't think it's in my free course right now. I think I use different numbers in the free course. So you want to go by the numbers in my book. It's basically 0.4 from day 1 all the way to about halfway through veg, and then 0.8 EC. If you want to know what that equals in ppms, just times it by 500. So 0.4 times 500, 0.8 times 500 on the calculator. So 0.4, 0.8. You can use 0.8 all the way throughout the beginning of flower. It's only when they start really packing on the buds, you can then bump it up to like 1.0 to 1.2. You really don't want to go over that, though. It's not necessary. And so there you go. That's that. So let's go ahead and use this stuff now. And so I can't remember. So I think, how much does she use here?
So it's not so much of a boring video. So I think I'm going to start with 30 milliliters. I think I normally start with 40. Let me see. Yeah, about 40. But I'm going to do 30 each, I think, is what I'm going to do. Pour
All
that
right,
in.
cool. So she's doing 30 milliliters, and then she's going to stir that up. There you go. And now we're going to use
Phone and
liquid
focus on.
liquid seaweed by MaxiCrop. This is a really good liquid seaweed. They make different brands of liquid seaweed. Sometimes these numbers will differ a little bit. Usually liquid seaweed always has, you know, phosphorus in it. Sometimes it has, or potassium. Sometimes it has a little bit of phosphorus, this middle number. Sometimes it even has a little bit of nitrogen. It really just depends on the brand you're using. I like this brand, it's really good. I really wanted something that gives me that potassium because I wanted extra potassium. This also has micronutrients because this comes from the sea, so it has also a lot of trace minerals because it is made from seaweed. This doesn't have a strong smell at all, so that's really good. Now here's where she messed up. You want to use twice as much liquid seaweed as you do whatever else you're using. So if you're using 30 milliliters, so she just put in 30 milliliters of the age-old liquid or fish and seaweed, the 332 stuff. So if you use 30 milliliters of that, you want to use 60 milliliters of this. In fact, liquid seaweed like this stuff here, it's so weak, you could almost just dump this right on top of your plant without harming it. In fact, I know someone that did that. They just straight used this as their fertilizer for the whole grow, and they used it straight out of the bottle, no water. They just watered their plant with that every day. I mean, they watered with a little bit of water as well, but they watered with this first as their actual feed, and then they add a little bit of water on top of that. But they also were growing organically with living soil. They were growing in soil, and so it had a lot of nutrients already in their soil. So keep that in mind. But anyway, this is great stuff. So it's really hard to burn your plant with this. Use twice as much. Just trust me, maybe even 3 times as much. If you can afford it, use 3 times as much liquid seaweed. So if you're doing, and also it doesn't raise the ppms. That's how you know it's really weak. You can add. So if you test the ppms before and after this stuff hardly changes the ppms at all. So if you're basically whatever the ppms are, based on which nutrient you decide to use, whether it's the Alaska fish and with a little bit of more bloom. Oh, I forgot to finish that thought. So if you're using, let's say, 20 milliliters of Alaska fish, then you want to use like 5 milliliters of more bloom, or maybe even half of what it is. So if you use 20 milliliters of Alaska fish, use 10 milliliters of more bloom, and that you want that whole thing to give you your overall ratio of what you're going to be doing. That's how you want to kind of use that stuff because you really want that extra. You don't want to just use Alaska fish for the whole flowering or for the whole veg stage. You want a little bit of more bloom in there, anywhere from a half to a quarter. So again, if it's 20 fish, use anywhere from 10 to 5 milliliters of more bloom. That's all throughout the grow. Then that ratio is going to bump up to half and half once you get into flower. So if you use 20 milliliters of Alaska fish, then you want to use a half, or excuse me, you want to use 20-20. There we go. The same amount is what I meant to say. So during flower, it's 20 milliliters fish, 20 milliliters more bloom by Alaska. And that will give you the overall ppms you need. You're going to have to figure that out by putting more bloom in a gallon of water, 10 milliliters, and then figure out how much ppms it changes. Then just do a little math, add those together so you get 0.8, and then eventually get 1.0. Even to 1.2, depends if the plants can handle it, which they should be able to. And there you go, that's how you get the nutrients. This is the stuff you're watering with every day. So you're going to go through quite a bit of it, just keep that in mind. You can also add liquid seaweed if you wanted to. It's really not necessary, but I still recommend adding liquid seaweed even if you're using the Alaska fish and more bloom. The reason why, like I said, there are other trace minerals that are in the liquid seaweed that you want to get in there, not or actual micronutrients like the other stuff like iron and stuff like that. You can also buy a liquid micronutrient that's organic, I think, you can add to it just to make sure. You can also add a powdered one, just top dress with one if you really think that your plants are suffering at all from that, but I found this works great. So so if you're using the more bloom in Alaska, you still want to add equal amounts of this. You don't have to do double this if you don't want to, but at least equal amounts. So if you're doing 20 milliliters Alaska fish and 20 milliliters more bloom, that would be 40 milliliters total. You want to use 40 milliliters of liquid seaweed as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and instead of doing double, she only adds the same amount. Again, you want to do double. But even adding the same amount, it doesn't really change the ppms much, like I said. So adding double would have hardly changed ppms.
So that's 0.6, and that was 30 milliliters each.
Okay, so 30 milliliters of each gave her 0.6. That was including the CalMag. Remember, our water is like pretty much point 0. It might be like 40 ppms. So usually it doesn't even register on the EC at all. It will register on the ppm part, which is like 40, but really doesn't. Our water is pretty much almost 0. So starting with pretty much almost 0 water, we added 3 milliliters of CalMag, and then we added 30 milliliters each of the age-old fish and kelp, and then the liquid seaweed, and we got 0. 0.6. So that's something you can base your math on right there if you're going to be using these products. You know that'll give you 0. 0.6. That's right around 3 gallons of water. And so now you know that, hey, if I wanted to bring my ppms up higher, you only have to add like maybe 10 milliliters more of each, right? Which she's going to show now, because she's actually going to bring this up to like, I think 0.8 or so. 0.6 is great for like mid-flower, or sorry, not mid-flower, mid-veg if you wanted to do that. But I recommend to put it to 0.8. Go for 0.4 to 0.8. All right, so let's go ahead and see how much she adds in here to get it up to 0.8. And I think right here.
Sometimes I have to do this. Sometimes I get it just right. Alright, so 15 of the fish and seaweed.
So 15.
Adding an extra.
So that's 45 total.
Fish and seaweed. Alright, and let's stir this up.
No, she stirs it up between everything she adds.
And then we're going to do 15 of...
Okay, cool. So 15 of each. So after putting 3 milliliters per gallon, so 10 milliliters for 3 gallons of water, 10 milliliters of the, or 9 milliliters of the CalMag, plus 45 milliliters of liquid seaweed, 45 milliliters of age-old kelp or fish and seaweed. And there you go. And that will bring us to, after she mixes that in, you see the numbers change. Now I think we're at 0.8 after she mixes it.
Perfect. So in total, it's 0.8 right now.
So there you go. So that's where you want to be at. 0.8 is great for like from mid veg all the way until like mid flower. Sometimes it's even all the way throughout flower might be enough. After you obviously want to do your PK boost a couple times. And again, to do the PK boost, so if you're only going to be using these two products, and you're not going to use like more bloom for your PK boost, I'm going to be using more bloom for my PK boost. So once the plant's big enough, and once it starts pre-flowering, I'm going to add all this stuff that I normally feed with, plus I'm going to add on the PK, the more bloom on top of that. So I'm going to add like probably 30 milliliters. Like however much of this stuff I'm adding, I'm going to equal that. So let's say I'm using 45 milliliters of these two products. Then I'll add 45 milliliters of the PK booster as well. And I might do that like at a different feeding. So I'll feed this first, and then I'll just mix up a batch of the PK, the More Bloom by Alaska, and I'll do 45 milliliters of that for 3 gallons of water, and then I'll water with that like later in the day. Or I'll just do one, day like that. Or sometimes I'll do half and half. So I'll knock everything in half because I don't want to get it too much nutrients at once. So if I'm feeding with 45 milliliters of the kelp and seaweed, or I'll just say fish and seaweed, then I would add, I would knock that down to like, let's say, I don't know, like 30 or 25, something like that. And then I would add another 30 of the PK booster on top of that. Now I'm going to do that for about 7 days, 3 different times. So 5 to 7 days. If you don't, this is all the same. So I'm repeating myself now because this is the exact same stuff I teach in my free grow course, the exact same stuff I teach in my grow book. So this is the same. Everything we're doing now is exactly the same as if I was doing synthetic nutrients. This is a hydroponic method. So in the beginning of flower for like 5 days, I would feed the More Bloom. I would wait again until about halfway through flower when the buds start to stack up and look like buds. I would do it again for 5 days, adding that to my nutrients for 5 days. Remember, we're watering every single day with nutrients to run off. And then toward the end, about 3 weeks before the plant's done, I would do a PK boost one more time. So I'm treating that as the PK boost. And yeah, so basically if you're only using these two products, do 2 to 1. During flower, you can use 3 times as much liquid seaweed if you wanted to. It's kind of expensive though, so you're going to be going through that really fast if you do that. So I just recommend adding a little bit of the more bloom to it if you wanted to just add a little bit extra. So throughout the flowering stage, you can add, let's say you're doing 45 milliliters of the age-old kelp, or the age-old fish and kelps, or fish and seaweed, I think it's called. So you're doing 45 milliliters of that. Then you're doing 45 milliliters, or excuse me, twice as much liquid seaweed. So you're doing 40, 45, 45. So you're doing 90 milliliters of the liquid seaweed. And then you would add like 20 milliliters of more bloom, 10 to 20 milliliters of more bloom. That's every day, all throughout flower. But for 3 of those times, you want to add like 30 milliliters of more bloom, 30 to 40 milliliters of more bloom to get the extra pK in there. And that's pretty much it. So that covers everything. So this brings you, so now you know that with 3 gallons of water, if you do 45 milliliters of the, I'm just gonna call it age old. Age old means fish and seaweed. 45 milliliters of age old and 45 milliliters of liquid seaweed and 10 milliliters of CalMag plus will bring you to exactly 0.8 EC. That's great to water with almost the entire grow. Now, the other thing you might want to, I like to do twice as much liquid seaweed. Honestly, adding twice as much liquid seaweed might bring you up to 0.9, maybe. So instead what you do 40 milliliters of, instead of 45, do 40 milliliters of age old and then do 80 milliliters of liquid seaweed. That should be 0.8 and use that throughout almost the entire grow. In fact, you could literally do that throughout the entire grow. From day one, it'd probably be fine because it's an organic nutrient. But I recommend using half of that. So to get 0.4, just knock that in half. So instead of 40-80, 20-40. 20 age old, 40 liquid seaweed. And do that for the beginning of the plant's life until about day 15 or so. From day 15 on, start hitting it with 0.8. And do 0.8 all the way until like halfway through flower. So actually in the beginning of flower, you do want to add a little bit of the more bloom. Or if you're not going to do more bloom, then just keep that ratio the same. It should be fine. Because it still has a pretty good ratio of everything. It becomes like a 3-3-3 basically, or a 3-3-4-5 if you add twice as much liquid seaweed. I'm trying to think what else you can do to, if you don't add more bloom, what else you can do for adding just a little bit extra phosphorus in there as well. Maybe add a little bit of top dress, a little bit of seagull poo from down to earth. Oh, I forgot to show you guys that, so I was going to show you that. But anyway, so that's pretty much that. I'll show you guys that too. Oh, now she pH downs it. I can't remember how much down it took. And then she had a pH up it, which we use this for pH up. Simply Silica. You can actually add Simply Silica too to add. It has even less potassium than the liquid seaweed, and liquid seaweed's all organic. But this is pretty strong stuff too, just like to help the plant build strength. Liquid seaweed does a better job, I think. But I like to use this as my pH up if I ever need to use it. All right, now real quickly, let's go to go and close this. I don't think she says anything else here. That's okay. Why is it not letting me? Yeah, it looks like.
So much for watching. Hope your year is continuing to be awesome. I hope it is awesome for the rest of the year. Stay tuned for the next update. Yeah, double peace.